out.
Okay, so process and program. We are at process. We all know what is program. Program is the code which we write, to intended for execution purpose, right? And what is process? Process is nothing but program which is in execution. So what the program needs for execution, that is all the resources required, right? So the code, that is program, and the resources required for its execution, and the state of that program is in execution. This together is nothing but your process. So the difference between program and process is program is a passive entity and process is a active entity. Program is only the code which you have written, that code file is your program, and the process is nothing but that execution of that program is going on, which has occupied all the resources. Okay, clear? Okay. Let us take an example. Suppose you have some editor like Microsoft Office Word. Okay, so editor program is written by someone and we are using that program. Okay, so that Microsoft Word program is the program, and the editor which we use, if we start the Microsoft Word, that is one editor. We can start multiple editors, multiple Microsoft Word files. So we have started multiple processes of the same program. They are executing now. Okay. So this is the example of process. Program in execution is nothing but the process. So a process can be in any of the state, either in running or not in running. If we elaborate this two-state process state transition diagram in details, so it will have 5 state models. So initially, refer this diagram. Initially, when fork system call is called, then process will get created and it will enter into new state. There are 5 states of process: new, ready, running, exit, and block. When we create the process with the help of fork system call, our process enters into new state. Then when it is admitted for execution, it goes into ready state. When it receives the CPU, it goes into running state. After completion, it goes into exit state. If completion is not over and process requires some event, then it goes into block state. Once that event is completed, event means it may require some input from some other program which has not given the input yet, like that. So if that event has occurred, that means process has received the input from others, then it will go again into the ready state. Then again it will get the CPU and goes into the running state. This way the process transits into 5 different states. This is the process control block. This is required. These are all the fields which are maintained by each process when it changes its state from one to other. That is new to ready to running, running to exit, or running to block.
फिर तुम एक मिनट कॉल काट रही हो, हाँ आवाज का प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है.
So these are all are the fields present in the process. Process can be divided into multiple threads. Thread means we can say they are lightweight processes. They are not having all the fields which are there in the PCB, that is process control. That one process can have multiple threads, and many of the fields present in that process control block will be shared between the multiple threads. These are theoretical parts. I will be taking a little bit faster so that we can focus more on the practical part. Now, types of schedulers. Now, where this scheduler is required, again re-refer this diagram. When we created process, Who is going to put this newly created process into the ready queue? Process having state as new has to be changed its state to ready. Who will do this? It has to be done by some scheduler. Again, the process which is there in the ready queue has to get the CPU and change its state to running. Who will do this? Again, one of the scheduler. If running process stops its execution because of some event, state has to be changed to block. So who will do this? This will be done by some scheduler. So we will see the types of scheduler. This is very important topic theory exam also. Types of scheduler. There are three types of scheduler. One is long-term scheduler, second is short-term scheduler, and third is middle-term scheduler. Now, long-term scheduler. What is long-term scheduler? It is the program or it is the scheduler which changes the state from new to ready. That means the scheduler which puts the newly created process into ready queue, that scheduler is known as long-term scheduler. Okay. Now, what is short-term scheduler? It is the scheduler which takes the process from ready queue and gives the CPU to it. That means CPU time will be allocated to one of the process in ready queue. So understood long-term scheduler and short-term scheduler. Now third scheduler is middle term scheduler or mid-term scheduler. What is this scheduler is when partially run process, partially executed process stops for some event to occur, it is transferred to waiting queue. So when this process will get the CPU, after its event will be completed, there in the waiting queue, and scheduler will assign the will put that process into the ready queue. Okay. Now from that ready queue, it will again get assigned by the short term scheduler. So these are the three types of scheduler: long term scheduler, short term scheduler, and middle term scheduler. These detailed notes are there in my handwritten notes as well as PPTs. So you can refer those which I have shared in the video. Okay, I hope all of you are clear with these three types of schedulers. Okay, I will go to the next slide. Now, scheduling will be done in two types. There are two types of scheduling. Now, who are schedulers? Long-term scheduler, that means new to ready process. Who will do this? Long-term scheduler. Short-term scheduler and middle-term scheduler. These schedulers are working in different ways. So, the way they are categorized in general categories like preemptive and non-preemptive. So, what is meant by preemptive? Preemption means stopping forcefully the execution of that particular process. Why to stop forcefully the process, executing process? That is because, suppose let us take an example. If some emergency patient come to the doctor and doctor is handling some normal patient who can be handled after some time. So doctor may change the priority of checking that current patient to the new patient which is critical. Okay. So if in system such kind of process comes which is critically, it has to be executed now only, then the CPU will change or CPU will forcefully stop the currently executing process and gives the CPU time to the process which is high priority process. So this is preemption. Preemption means forcefully stopping the currently executing process so that the other process will be executed because it is having high priority or some other reason. Okay. Non-preemption means what? The facility of forcefully stopping is not allowed in the system. If operating system is not allowing to forcefully stop the currently executing process, then we say that particular scheduler is non-preemptive scheduler. Okay, so these are the broad general categories of scheduler, that is preemptive and preemptive. These schedulers are again divided into different categories, but for that division, different criteria are considered, that is CPU utilization, throughput, turnaround time, waiting time, response time. Now, these are the criteria for better performance. That means CPU utilization must be better. If we increase the CPU utilization, we say the system is working better. Throughput means how many number of processes you are executing in 1 unit of time. Okay, so we need to increase the throughput. The CPU utilization and throughput has to be more as possible. Okay, then turnaround time is nothing but the time required by the process when it start. That means from new to ready queue, when the process enters into ready queue and the process enters into exit, that means its execution is completed. So total time when process enters into ready queue and it goes to exit, that total time is nothing but turnaround time. It includes the waiting time also. That means turnaround time is nothing but execution time plus waiting time. Okay, so we want to minimize this turnaround time as less as possible. So turnaround time, waiting time, and response time must be as less as possible. So the criteria are nothing but CPU utilization and throughput should be as more as possible, and turnaround time, waiting time, and response time should be as less as possible. So by referring to these criteria, we can select the different algorithms which are there. Now, different algorithms for selection of process from ready queue to the running, ready to running state. That means which scheduler? Short-term scheduler. For short-term scheduler, different algorithms used are first come first serve, shortest job first, priority, and round robin. So one of these algorithms I'm going to cover here in detail, and rest of the algorithms you just refer from the notes. So okay, let us start with the first come first serve. Let us take a general example. When we want to withdraw some money from ATM card, and there are many people waiting for withdrawing the money. So what we will do? We will make a queue. So who will get the chance first? The person who comes first will get the chance first to withdraw the money. Exactly similar way this algorithm works. All the processes which are created will be there in the new state. They will enter into ready queue. The process which is created first will be entered into ready queue first, and the process which is there in the ready queue first will get the chance to execute first, and this is nothing but the first come first serve criteria or first come first serve algorithm, which is used by short term scheduler, which is also called as CPU scheduler. The name is given as CPU scheduler because it gives the CPU time to the processes which are there in the ready. Now, how it works that we will see with the example. This example I have already covered in the notes. There are so many examples in the notes. You can refer only one example which we are going to cover here. Now consider the example. Consider the following set of processes for first come first serve scheduling, and find out the waiting time, turnaround time for each process, and then calculate the average waiting time and average turnaround time. Remember that as we have discussed different criteria, which scheduling for scheduling algorithm to perform better, what we are considering, there should be less turnaround time and there should be less waiting time. Okay, so these are the processes given. These are the processes. There are three processes given: process P1, process P2, and process P3. Burst time, that is nothing but execution time required for each process, is given accordingly. P1 requires 24 units of time, P2 requires 3, and P3 also requires 3 units of time. And let us assume they are coming in the same sequence. That means P1 will be created first, then P2 will be created, and then P3 will be created. All the processes are saved first order. Chart is done. So refer this chart. Here, the first process, that is P1, will be there. This zero indicates zero time unit. This is our assumption that system's zeroth time unit, the process P1 starts its execution. How much time it requires for completion? Time units. So it executes 24. From that 24th time unit, the process P2 starts, requires 3 time units. So it goes till 27 time unit. Then from 27 time unit,
ऐसे होता है पढ़ाई.
it starts and goes till time. So this representation of the processes in this chart is known as Gantt chart. Now, by referring to this chart, we will create one table because it is asked in the question that you have to write the turnaround time and waiting time for each process. So to do this, we will write this table. So there are 3 processes. Their required burst time, these 2 columns are given. Now start time, when the process starts its execution, we know by referring to this chart, P1 starts at 0, P2 starts at 24, and P3 starts at 27. Like this way, the finish time for each process, P1 finishes at 24, P2 finishes at 27, and P3 finishes at 30th time unit. Now waiting time for the process in the ready queue. So P1 and P1, P2, P3, all the 3 processes enters into ready queue at 0th time unit. Okay. Now P1 starts immediately its execution. That means it has to wait for 0 time units. So waiting time for process P1 is P2, which enters the ready queue at 0th time unit, but it gets the CPU at 24th time unit. That's why it has to wait for 24 time units. And similarly, P3 has to wait for 27 time units. And this is nothing but the turnaround time for each and every process, and this is waiting time for each and every process. One thing which is asked is covered. Now, second asked is find out the average turnaround time and average waiting time. So take the average is 27. Take the average of this, that is average waiting time, average is 70. So if the same question is solved with other algorithm, you have to check the average turnaround time and average waiting time. The average waiting time and turnaround time is less, we say that particular algorithm is better for this particular having the given burst time. This way we can compare the different algorithms, different scheduling algorithms, and by comparing, CPU will select the best possible algorithm for its execution depending on the situation. Okay. Now let us look at the different other algorithms. Now shortest job first. That means, now what is the problem with this first come first serve algorithm? Let us assume there is some process which is entered in which entered into ready queue at 0th time unit, and but it has entered at the last. That means there are 10 processes which are having different execution times, and the last 11th process having very less execution time is at 11th number. So it has to wait for so much time, and the situation in which the very small process is not getting the CPU for its execution for very long time. That means its execution time is very less, but its waiting time is too much as compared to its execution time. We say the situation is uh, the process is not getting the CPU for longer time, and uh, this should not be there in the system. So the problem is solved. This problem available with the first come first serve algorithm will be solved with the help of other algorithms. So let us assume shortest job first. What this algorithm does is, all the processes which are there in ready queue, it compares their execution time, that is burst time. The process having less burst time will be given the CPU first, and then the next process which is having next smallest execution time will be given the next chance, and so on. This way there will not be starvation. The starvation problem is there in the first come first serve algorithm, that is very small process has to wait for very large time. Okay, that starvation problem will be solved by using the shortest job first algorithm. Now shortest job first algorithm gives the chance to smallest processes first, then the largest processes. So waiting time, average waiting time will be reduced. Now, again, refer to the previous slide. We have categorized the different algorithms into general category, that is preemptive and non-preemptive. We will consider that criteria here also. Now, first come, first serve. This algorithm is strictly non-preemptive. That means the execution of some process is started, then the CPU will be released after its execution. CPU cannot be taken out from that process forcefully in between before its execution. So first come first serve is the non-preemptive algorithm. That's why there can be the possibility of starvation. Okay. Now shortest job first. In shortest job first, we can consider this in both ways. That is preemptive and non-preemptive. So let us assume the non-preemptive way. So for the same example, if suppose we consider the same example, which process will be executed first? P1, P2, P3. All the three processes are there in the ready. This is our assumption. So consider the burst time 24:33. Arrange it in ascending order. So P2 and P3 are having same. So any of these two processes will get the chance first. So let us assume P2 will execute first, P3 will be executed second, and P1 will be executed third. So for P2, waiting time will be 0. For P3, waiting time will be 3. And for P1, the waiting time will be 3 plus 3, 6. That means average waiting time will be 0 plus 3 plus 6. And the average will be 3. So if you compare with this, average waiting time in case of first come first serve is 17, whereas average waiting time in case of shortest job first, by referring to these processes and the same burst time, will be 3 only. So if we compare these two algorithms, which is better one? Shortest job first. Why? Because it has less waiting time. Okay. Okay, so this way there will be priority scheduling and the round robin. Round robin is exactly similar to your first come first serve, but in first come first serve we we consider it as non-preemptive. Round robin is preemptive version of first come first serve. Here the timestamp is given to each process. Whatever is its execution time, the process will be executed only for that particular timestamp, and then it has to release the CPU. The turn of next process will be executed. All the processes will be executed turn by turn for that particular timestamp, and the CPU time will be shared between the process. The detailed example is given in the notes, handwritten notes. All the students, this is my request that today you all please refer the notes for all these types of algorithms, scheduling algorithms, because in next lecture we will try to cover the practical point or code of these algorithms. Okay, and this is there for your external exam. So please take it seriously. Please study hard these algorithms, and we will see the code in the next. Now, these are some possible questions that can be asked in the theory exam, like what is the difference between process and program? What is process control block? What is state transition diagram for the process, and so on. Refer these questions also. If you find any difficulty in answering any of these questions, feel free to call me or message me at any time. These are some more examples on scheduling. So, we will start with the next topic now, because this chapter is having two practical assignments. One is scheduling algorithm and second is banker's algorithm. So I will tell you that banker's algorithm part now. Now, what happens is the deadlock. The next topic which we are going to cover is deadlock. What is mean by deadlock? We know the general meaning of deadlock. Where you have faced the deadlock in traffic. At some signal, all the people in all the sites are coming and they are in hurry and they are not waiting for any other to go, and all have to wait for long time. So that situation all of us must have uh, faced during the high traffic. So here, in terms of system, what is mean by deadlock? That we will see. Deadlock is nothing but there are multiple processes, set of processes which are occupying some resources. In multi-processing operating system, multiple processes can execute at a time. Okay, this is for multi-processor operating system. So multiple processes. Let us assume there are three processes executing simultaneously. That means they are sharing the CPU time in between them. So process P1, P2 and P3 are there and they are occupying some resources. Let us assume there are 4 resources or there are 3 resources R1, R2 and R3. Process P1 is occupying the resource R1 and it requires R2 also for its execution. Okay. So all the processes are occupying the resources and they are waiting for the resources which are already occupied by some other process. And other processes are not ready to release their resources because they have not completed their execution. This way, all the processes are going into waiting state, and this waiting state is permanent. This situation, we say, it is a deadlock situation. What is deadlock? Deadlock is a situation in which set of processes are waiting for unlimited time, for infinite time. Why they are waiting? Because they require some resource which is already occupied by the other processes, and other processes which are occupying those resources are not ready to release those resources. Why they are not ready to release those resources? Because they have not completed their execution. Okay, and this uh, deadlock can be easily represented with the help of resource allocation graph. You can observe in this graph, all the circles are represented with the help of all the processes are represented with the help of circle, and all the resources are represented with the help of squares. The dots present in that square is the number of instances of that particular resources available. Let us assume there are 2 input devices. So this block, this square is representing the input resource, and 2 dots present in that square means there are 2 input devices. So circles are processes, squares are resources, and the dots present in that block is nothing but number of instances of that particular type of resource. Now this arrow indicates, the arrow from process to resource indicates that process P1 is requesting for the resource RA. If this resource is available, that will be allocated to this process. Now, how this allocation will be represented in reverse direction? Suppose there is an arrow from a resource to process. What it indicates? It indicates this instance, this dot present in this block. This instance of resource RA type will be given to the process P1. Now, consider the next diagram. Here, process P1 is requesting for resource RA. Now, this RA having only one instance will be given to process P2. Now, process P2, which is having the resource RA, wants to get the resource RB, but it is there with the process P1. This diagram indicates the deadlock. How this is indicated? This deadlock, because process P1, which is already having resource RB, but for its execution it requires RA. That's why it is not able to complete its execution. Whereas process P2, which is already having the resource RA, but it requires RB also for its execution. The set of process here, in this set, two processes are there. They are occupying some of the resources and they are waiting for some other resources which are occupied by other processes, and other processes are not ready to release those resources because they have not completed their execution. The situation represented in this graph is nothing but the deadlock. Now, because of this deadlock, process P1 as well as process P2 cannot execute, and this will reduce the performance of the operating system, and we need to use some algorithms so that the operating system should work faster and its utilization should be done properly. The same thing will be explained here, which we have seen by referring these diagrams. Resource allocation graph. That diagram is nothing but resource allocation. Now, how to find out there is the deadlock? There is a deadlock. Compulsory there is a deadlock. If there are 4 conditions present in the system, compulsory, we can say these are the necessary conditions for deadlock to occur in the system. Now, these 4 conditions, again, this is the important question with respect to your theory examination. Now, first condition, mutual exclusion. Second condition is hold and wait. Third is no preemption. Fourth is circular. Now, consider this mutual exclusion. This is regarding resource. If system is having some resources and all the resources present in the system are mutually exclusive, that means if some resource R1 is given to process P1, the process P1 is not ready to share that resource with any other resource. If the resource is given to some process, it is exclusively given to that process only. No other process can share that resource with that means no two processes can share any of the resource present in the system. So if such kind of resources are available in the system, there is chance of having deadlock because resources cannot be shared. Second condition, hold and wait. If the processes are holding some resource and also waiting for some other resource which is there which is held by the other processes. If such kind of processes are there in the system, there is a chance of deadlock to occur. Hold and wait means processes are holding some resource and they cannot complete their execution only with that many resources which are there with them. They are also waiting for some other resources. Next is non-preemption. That means we cannot forcefully, we have already seen preemption and non-preemption during the scheduling algorithms. So the processes are like, we cannot forcefully stop the process execution in between. The process can release the resource, release the CPU only after its completion. The process which is holding the CPU will hold it for longer time, and if it is not having all the required resources, it will go in waiting state for infinite time unit. Okay. So no preemption means we cannot force any of the process from its execution. We cannot stop the process execution in between. Now circular wait. Circular wait is nothing but the situation which we have already seen in the previous diagram. Here you can see this is circular wait. P1 is holding R1 waiting for P1 is holding R2 waiting for R1. P2 is holding R1 waiting for R2, and that means P1 is dependent on P2 because P2 is holding its required resource and P2 is dependent on P1. So their dependencies can be shown as a circular way. So this is nothing but circular way. If the set of processes goes into circular way, then we say there is a chance of deadlock. So if all these four conditions are there in the system, that's why we say they are necessary conditions. All the four conditions are there in the system compulsorily, then we say there exists deadlock. If any of the condition is made as a false, then deadlock can be avoided. Okay, so these are the necessary conditions for deadlock to occur. Now, how to handle deadlock? What is the problem with the deadlock? Deadlock can minimize or reduce the performance of the system. Now, how to avoid this deadlock? Either we can prevent the deadlock or we can avoid the deadlock, or if the deadlock is already there, we can detect and recover from it. We always say prevention is better than cure. That's why we are all are at home to prevent the corona. Like that way, like we are preventing the corona by staying at home, we will prevent the deadlock by using the prevention algorithm. Now, how to prevent the deadlock? As we have just now discussed that there are four necessary conditions for deadlock to occur. If any of these four conditions is not there, we can stop the deadlock, we can prevent the deadlock from occurring. So make any of these conditions false, the deadlock can be prevented. So how system can make this? Either system will provide the sharing of resources, because mutual exclusions means no sharing is allowed. Okay. That means that if resources are allowed in shared way, then deadlock can be avoided. Hold and wait. How to make this situation false? If the process is holding the resource and waiting for the other resources, and its execution cannot happen without getting those waiting resources, then it has to release the resources so that at least other processes can execute. So the process which is there in the waiting state cannot hold any of the process. If this rule is applied by the system, the second condition can be made as false. The third condition, if because of some process others the system is going in deadlock, then operating system is forcefully stopping the execution of some of the process in between, then we say the third condition can be made as false, which can again prevent the deadlock from occurrence. The last condition is circular wait. That means that circular chain of dependency, if we can break that chain, then we can say deadlock can be prevented. So by making any of these four conditions as false, we can prevent the deadlock from occurrence. Now, what is the problem with the deadlock prevention algorithm or deadlock prevention? If we make any of these false, what will happen to the system? Low resource utilization. That means when the resource utilization will be less. Suppose if we want to try, if we are trying to make this second condition false, the process which is in waiting state has to release the resources. That means those resources, if they are not required by any of the other process, those resources will be kept as free. So it will the system will face the problem of low resource utilization. Another problem is reduced system throughput. Throughput means the number of processes which are completing its execution per unit time. So by making any of these conditions false, what we will be doing, we will be reducing the system throughput. So to prevent this big problem of deadlock, we will be suffering with some smaller problems like low resource utilizations and the low system throughput. So we will check whether these smaller problems are affordable, or we will see for the next strategy for handling the deadlock. How to handle the deadlock? That is by avoidance. Now, how to avoid this deadlock? There are two approaches. One approach is do not start the process if its demands lead to deadlock. That means suppose P1 is a process wants to have 3 resources and 3 resources are not available with the system will not start that process. Okay, one approach for avoiding the deadlock. Second approach is do not grant an incremental resource request to the process if this allocation might lead to the deadlock. That means already started process which is occupying already 2 resources. Let us assume process P1 is already occupying 2 resources, that is R1 and R2, and it requires resource R3 also for its execution, and R3 will lead to the deadlock. Then don't grant the permission. That means don't allow the process P1 to go in waiting state for resource R3, because of that allocation, or because of that waiting of P1 for R3 lead the system into deadlock. So such processes will not be allowed to go in the wait state. Next, yes, these are the strategies. Now, how these strategies can be applied. Now, before starting of the processes execution, how we will get to know whether the execution of these many processes will lead the system into the deadlock. That is by checking whether there is a safe state or not. Now, what is mean by safe state? Safe state is required for Banker's algorithm. From this point onwards, we are going towards the Banker's algorithm, which is there in our practical, and we have to implement this code and do this in your practical examination. Okay. So listen carefully. Safe state. This is again oral question asked by all the examiners, compulsory to those students who will execute the Banker's algorithm. What is mean by safe state? Now, safe state is the state of system in which system can execute all the processes which are there in the system just by changing their order of execution. Okay. Now, how that details we will see, but just understand this graph, this representation. Now, this is safe state and this is unsafe state. If we can identify that the system can go in safe state, that means there is no chance of any deadlock. So it doesn't mean if there is no safe state, that means there is a compulsory deadlock. No. If system is there in unsafe state, there might be the chance of deadlock. It is not compulsory, but there might be the chance of deadlock. There may be question in your theory like which is dependent on this diagram. Like if the system is in unsafe, it is not compulsory that it will go in the deadlock. Justify your statement. You have to draw this diagram, you have to explain the safe state, and you have to explain why the system which is not in the safe state, it is not compulsory that it will always have the deadlock. Okay. Again, the diagram is important. Before starting with the Banker's algorithm, we will understand different data structures used in the Banker's algorithm. There are different matrices. One is available matrix, second is max, third is allocation, and fourth is need. Available means there are different processes and there are different resources. Each resource is having different instances available in it. This will be given to you, okay, and it will be represented in the form of matrix. So matrix will look like this. Available matrix. There are R1 and R2 resources. There are different instances of the resource available for that. R1, one instance is available, R2, one instance is available. Okay, so such kind of matrices will be given. Second is max. Max means maximum demand of each process. How this will be represented? Let us take an example. This is a max matrix. There are three processes P1, P2 and P3. There are two resources R1 and R2. Maximum demand of process P1 is it requires one instance of R1 and one instance of R2. Maximum demand of process P2 for completion of its execution is two instances of R1 and it requires maximum 3 instances of R2. Maximum requirement for P3 is 2 instances of R1 and 2 instances of R2. This way, this is the maximum requirement of process P1, P2 and P3. These are the available resources, instances of resources given to us. And what is next is allocation matrix. So what is allocation? This is currently allocated resources. This is maximum requirement. This is currently allocation. What is need? Need is nothing but need matrix is given here. Need matrix is given here. Need is nothing but maximum minus allocation. Okay, so that can be checked. So this is allocation. This is maximum. Maximum minus need. 0 resources of R1 type are required for P1 and 1 resource for R2 type are required for process P1 to complete its execution. Okay, so this way we can check whether the process P1 can be executed, whether the process P2 can be executed, and so on. So Banker's algorithm requires these 4 data structures. These are matrices, and we will refer to this solved example. It is there in my notes. I think time is over and next lecture has to be started. So we will see details of the Banker's algorithm, this example, and also with the code in the next lecture. Thank you all. Don't forget to share the experience which you have got through this lecture on my personal WhatsApp. Okay, thank you.